So another one that's a historical system called the wick system. By far what's described as the simplest type of hydroponic system, and it's are described by hydroponic enthusiasts as a passive system, though from a permaponic standpoint, we describe passive as no active or mechanical parts. In this system, they have a pump. So that to me is still an active system. You're utilizing an electrical pump, but in this instance, a 24-hour day for an air pump. The reason they need the air pump is the wick on this system where it comes out of the water into the grow bed, it's exposed to algae growing on the wick. And the major issue with this is if your wick gets algae growing on it, in order to change the wick or clean it, you have to basically take the system apart, either change and or clean the wick and put it back together. So that's the real problem with this particular system when we think about the ergonomics or the production cycle. So in my production cycle, I don't want to be doing those types of maintenance tasks. So from a permaponics standpoint also, we may think about another concept or a principle of permaponics. We want to have reduced maintenance, okay? Maintenance is an issue. Maintenance takes my free time and my money, thus my profit. So the maintenance of that is a difficulty, and that's why they're running the air pump to try to alleviate the high oxygenated water. Algae doesn't like that. So they're running the air pump all the time to stop algae. The water culture system, again, you see, this is more of a floating platform. This is the early experiments with the ICB that we saw now popularized. Lots of people like to do this ICB, International Bulk Carrier is the first one. But this was the original one. Basically, you took a fish tank, you put a styrofoam top on it, you floated plants in it, and the fish tank with the air circulation in a fish tank and a fish, and you grew plants. Oh, wow, interesting. How well do they grow? What's the nutritional content? Interesting, they only can grow certain types of plants that will grow in that environment. More likely because when you check the nutritional quality of those types of plants, they don't take very much nutrition to actually grow. So plants that need more nutrition don't thrive in low nutrition environments. So it'd be very difficult to describe plants that can grow in low nutritional environments as nutritional. And thus we see the calorific calorie intake. It takes more calories to digest those plants than they're actually worth. So we want to be able to have those because some of them are quite tasty. We like to have them as, say, a garnishment, right? Filler foods. But what about the more dense, the more nutritious vegetable, herbs, fruits that we may want? And this is where we're going to focus on being able to, say, do both. This only allows me to do one, the lower end of the spectrum, but I cannot do any of the medium to high end plants, or as we go to the supermarket, the more valuable plants. We tend to pay for nutrition, okay? The ebb and flow system, interesting system. It works by temporary flooding a grow tray with nutrient solution, and then it drains it back into a reservoir. A lot of people will see here what is described as the overflow is actually described as a bell siphon. So people like to, on the internet, create or make a bell siphon. It's an interesting, say, little project to see how it works, and it's cool. Again, I would classify as a little science experimenty. Once you get the bell siphon working, though, it's not really adjustable very well. So if it's not exactly what you want, you got to kind of do it again, and it's got a lot of that, and that's fun, don't get me wrong. But with the simple addition that we'll show on Permaponics with a standpipe, we kind of alleviate, and it's easier to adjust the height of our water, and much less technical. So it makes it more accessible to more people. Non-technical people can make a standpipe. It takes a little bit more technical nature or desire to make a bell siphon, besides the maintenance of it and the non-ability to, like, say, change the level very easily for a normal person. So we'll look at that later. So here's our ebb and flow system. It has what's called an on-off. So this one utilizes a timer that'll flood and then drain, flood and then drain. Okay, so it's up and then down, up and then down. That's what's basically going on several times a day. If we lose our timer, though, it'll drain, or we lose our electricity and it won't reflood, and if we come home after work, guess what happened? No more plants. My plants are dead. Oh, man. So now I got to get batteries and backups, and it gets complicated. If they would have the soil, and you had what we'll show as our standpipe system with a wicking system, then you don't lose your water because the water is held in the reservoir and is able to wick up 24 hours a day at a consistent rate utilizing gravitational or forces. Then we're utilizing gravity and nature to our advantage. This is taking those natural forces away from the system and replacing them with artificial electrical pumping. So what happens with an ebb and flow? Here we see the system stops. 2 hours later, all of our seedlings are wilted or looking dead. And from the grasses, the second level successional grasses that people typically grow in these non-nutrient dense systems, they, after 2 hours, lose their, what we might say, they become bitter. They're not crisp, they're not fresh. They become bitter, and we don't typically like to eat lettuces and things that have become bitter. So if with only 2 hours of a problem, if you don't solve it within 2 hours, then your whole product of whatever you're growing can be lost or unpalatable. And if you have a large system trying to sell to a market to support your cash flow or your family, and that happened, you may go out of business. So then people have a lot of what you might call stress related to these systems by the lack of electrical or a pump breaking or some type of failure, because I can lose everything. And then that creates these redundancies and secondary pumps and secondary electrical systems and battery backups and generators and all this stuff, and they become very expensive. So on a commercial scale, this is a very expensive system. So maybe in the United States, to purchase from a company that would sell to us a permaculture, a hydroponic system, say a warehouse system that would support a family, a small business, that might cost $250,000 to have that system delivered, set up, and now I'm a commercial level hydroponic grower. Okay, that's quite a lot of investment, and so there's a lot of cash flow needed. And if it breaks for 2 hours, and the reason it costs so much is because of the reason of the water generated through the system. So if we can mitigate that with the Chinampas, remember old school technology, the Aztecs, the Incas, the Mayans, they figured this stuff out, guys, tens of thousands of years ago. So we kind of look to history to figure out how to grow food in the present. So the drip system, they're probably the most widely used type of hydroponic system in the world. Operation is reasonably simple. A timer controls a submerged pump. When the pump is on, the nutrient solution drips onto the base of each plant with a small drip line. So as long as your pump keeps doing that, it drips through. But within a certain period of time, there's no water retention capacity or very low water retention capacity in this system, so it would dry up. But a little bit different style, a little bit probably more resilient than the ebb and flow. So this is where you see people utilizing this one, probably more so from the maintenance standpoint. This is less maintenance than the ebb and flow. The ebb and flow is a little bit more mechanical and cool, and if you like that, you go with the ebb and flow, and if you more so this way. So we see this more so in a more commercialized growing. And then we have the recovery or the drip system. Excess nutrient solution that runoffs collects back into the reservoir for reuse. And if we look at the infographic, we see it's kind of colored, looks like dirt. Because a lot of people did that. They just said that we knew there was through flow, which would have some nutrient. So if we just put a drip system on a bed and we dripped it and we collected the excess dripping, we could pump it back. So this is the recovery drip system, which is very similar to Permaponics. We just said, well, why do we need to let it drip out? What if we merged the beds and then we allowed it to without a pump? In this instance, we could allow it to use capillary action, right? So then kind of what we start to see is these hybrid systems. So recovery drip doesn't have to have soil, but I can imagine that people have done it with soil. Okay? The problem that they may find is depending on how you do your soil and you run your timers, and some people in the past weren't able to use timers very well. But technology is going very fast, and now timers are quite cheap. They're quite easy to utilize, easy to get. So now we can start to see how we can control our timers better, and it'll kind of bring this, wow, they were having a problem to use soil in the past, maybe because they couldn't control the water. But today for $5, we can control the water infinitely. So for just $5 timer, I can go to Africa and change someone's life, right? Why can't I use a $5 timer? And this is what we want to look into. Why can't I use a piece of PVC pipe that costs $1 to make a standpipe and a plastic tarp? And if with only less than $10 of materials in a backpack, I can go change their life. This is where Permaponics brings these things together, but with asking the question, who's it for? Is it for a person who has money that can buy food at the supermarket? Or is it for a person who wants to grow his own food? Or is it for a person that lives in a place where there is no supermarket? Hell, it doesn't rain for 8 months a year. This is where $10 makes a difference. So hopefully we'll see that. So the non-recovery or drip system is a drip system, and they don't recover the nutrient laden, which is not much different than what we see in our standardized garden. We water, it through flows, nothing happens. Hey, that's okay, non-recovery. But this system, we're typically in Permaponics looking at a recovery-based system. And nutrient film technology is quite new. People are also getting into that. In this instance, we may see what are like grow tubes, a long PVC pipe. Imagine a 4-inch PVC pipe with holes drilled to hold net cups on a slight angle. We pump the nutrient up, it flows down over the roots get nutrient. The pump in this system typically runs 24 hours a day. So in the energy aspect, 24 hours a day utilizes a lot of energy. From a permaculture aspect on our commercial based system that we have, so we have small scale, medium scale, commercial scale. Our commercial based system right now runs 1 hour a day versus what might be considered a hydroponic competitor running 24 hours a day. So that's a big difference on the amount of energy that may be utilized. And in that instance, we can run our system on a pure solar. So I only need 1 hour of solar per day. Even in the worst solar areas, you can still do that. Where if I need to run 24 hours a day, that's really difficult because I'd have to have a lot of batteries and I'd have to have backups or separate pumps. So these are the things that we want to look at, the reasons that when we get into the details of Permaponics. Why did we choose that pump? Why did we choose that part? Why did we wire it in this way? And this all comes down to free time, maintenance, nutrition. This is why we made these choices and what we want to share. An aeroponic system, probably the most high-end system today, really nice, can be nice, probably purely non-organic because of what they're spraying and the need to have misters, and the misters need to have very pure water, if you will. They can't have any particulates in it. So that's not necessarily easy for people that don't have access to like very, very clean water. So it's a great system. It has what's called a short cycle timer, which is interesting. We have a same short cycle timer in our permaponic systems, except for we don't use the misters, as we see that parts and pieces of this system are kind of expensive. So you get beholden to replacing parts from specific suppliers. Where in Permaponics, all of our parts, and we live in a third world country in that little city that's town, if you will, village, that's nearby, all of the parts that we can use to build a Permaponic system are available in a local third world country, where none of the parts available for that are available pretty much in the whole country. So that might not be a reason why to say we don't do it. If you can have availability of those parts, it's fine, except for they're not cheap, and it's not necessarily easy for you to control. So we also look at that as maybe another principle of when we're designing things here at Raktamachat, because we design many things, that the ability for us to maintain the system ourselves is very important. If we have a system that we cannot maintain ourselves, we're beholden to somebody to do that, and we're not going to be able to make a living, because I'm always paying for this person to come repair it, and he gets all the money, and I don't know how to do it. So we need to have accessibility to repair and maintenance ourselves. So other things that are happening in the world of hydroponics, students, for instance, it's being taught in schools. So teachers, science teachers particularly, are deciding, hey, this is really cool. We should teach kids about this. This is super cool, and they're interested, and we can show them how to do all these things. So we'll go through some of the things that students may learn in, say, a school setting, especially in a science-related setting. So first thing, drainage. So these systems all need to have drains. So you can talk to students about drains, and you get them to require that they're going to check the drainage during and after the plant growth. So then they can monitor how that happens. Many times they have loose pipes or roots or problems or something breaks. So they can discuss, oh, this broke and that's why our plant didn't grow good, okay? So that's pretty much interesting for that. Students then are required to monitor pH levels, because most of these systems that are being shown, or they're teaching them, you can grow your own food. The problem is you can grow your own food with chemicals. It's like a science lab, right? You got your beaker, so you just pour all this stuff in there, but problem, pH is measured in 1,000 units. So every time it moves one number, it's 1,000 times more powerful. So it's very difficult to balance the pH. I put a little bit of this, oh, well, now I can put some more of this to bring it down. And you have, imagine kids doing this, so they're not being as precise as maybe a professional. So the pH level is going all over the place while the plants are growing. And the pH level is very important because that's how the plant takes up nutrients. So if you grow a plant at the wrong pH level, it's not able to take up the nutrients properly. So it's great to try to teach kids about pH, but what's interesting, or I'd say sad, is that if we have soil, soil balances the pH for us. And then when we're adding things that are naturalized, not liquids in a bottle, the pH balances to the particular plant much easier. So we utilize soil to help us with pH balancing. When you alleviate, you take away the soil, that creates the need for all this. And so, but hey, you know how they promote it? Students will manage the system by adjusting the pH levels. Good pH levels for vegetable growth can be found in hydroponic packets. All you need to do is get a little packet and pour the stuff in, and it's all good. And this is how we grow food in the future. Just pour chemicals into a thing, and it's all good. Turn the switch on. I wonder that that's organic. I wonder that it's getting in touch with the people having the, say, innate nature of being in touch with their food. And I also wonder about the nutritional quality of the food if all you're doing is adding in packets of things. Students can learn how lights are important, so indoor systems in the future of growing foods in more urban settings. So they can check the lights, how much do they travel, how hot do they get, how do you wire them, how do you change them, these type of things are also good. And students can monitor these systems, and they can check the nutrient values, so they're going to do like pH tests, they're going to do soil tests, and these are all good. So that's where the future is today. Students learning about hydroponics in the classroom. I would hope in the future that Permaponics could also be added into that. So everything's the same, but where's the soil? Don't take anything away from that, but if you're a science teacher listening to this, where's the soil? Where's the soil food web? Okay, that's the major thing. So we can look at different types of lights. This has made a big difference in hydroponics. The ability to grow indoors, so light technology has changed. And if we look at different types of lights, it gives us different results. So it's a good thing to know. So light determines what you can grow. Some plants, such as vegetables, require direct sunlight. Plants such as violets need indirect sunlight. So there's different types of bulbs. High intensity discharge, or the HID. They're the most cost-effective to operate and have an extremely long life. You also have high pressure sodium. This provides more of the red-orange spectrum, and that's great for flowering and fruiting plants. So particularly if you might be in the marijuana industry, you may want that color. But if you had a metal halide, that would provide more blue-green spectrum, and that's good for vegetative growth. So if I was growing more of let's say a vegetable that did not fruit or flower, then I would have a metal halide. But I can also have a metal halide during the growing, and then I can switch to my high-pressure sodiums at fruiting. So you can see where we can start to see that we can play with the color spectrums to get an improved yield. So fluorescents are very inefficient. People did start with fluorescents, but you had to get it really, really close to the plant to get any benefit, and that's why they had chains and rails and stuff. People have pretty much gone off of that for the HIDs, and/or a lot of people are now using LEDs for the same thing. LEDs utilizes less heat, and typically we can change the color spectrum with the single LED bulb. So LEDs are kind of moving past the high intensity discharges.